Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for the sound problems there. We're still getting used to things here, I'm afraid. We'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on alternative pathways to veterinary careers, brought to you by GROWS as part of the Southern Collaborative Network. Whilst there's an opportunity to raise your hand during the session, we'd encourage you to jot down your questions and ask them at the end, or you can type them in and I will collect them up and we'll try and answer as many as we can at the end. If your question doesn't get answered, please feel free to forward it onto the contact email address at the end of this presentation also. So I think if everybody's here and everybody's happy, then we'll make a start. The aims of today basically are to talk to you about the alternative routes into veterinary careers and how higher education can support that. So we'll be discussing a variety of higher education programs of study, which includes foundation and honours degree programs. We thought we'd just spend 5 minutes quickly talking to you about foundation degree programs as a viable program of study at higher education. Typically, the foundation degree lasts around 2 years of full-time study, or 3 years if it has a sandwich year. They're designed for students who recognise themselves as practical, hands-on learners, and the content of the course and the way in which students are assessed are both benchmarked against the same level as the equivalent years on an honours degree course, using the framework for higher education qualifications. And there is a link on this slide if you wish to visit that. There are a number of top-up programs available for foundation degree graduates. So after 2 years of study, they can pursue their studies to gain a full honours degree in the same time that it takes a normal honours degree student. One of the best routes, I think, through higher education, a foundation degree takes you on a journey through gaining graduate level skills, study skills, and it also incorporates an element of practical and work experience. At present, there are no foundation degrees available linking specifically to becoming a veterinarian. Oh no. Therefore, if students recognise themselves as practical learners, the various alternative pathways into vet-related careers might be good news. And to gain graduate level jobs, it is likely you'll need to do a top-up onto an honours degree programme, but they could take time out and work before doing this. So the foundation degree is a highly viable route for those students who recognise themselves as practical learners. Okay. We also thought it might be interesting just briefly to give you some information to give back to students around why you might not want to be a veterinarian when you're a vet. So we sat down to think about some of the things that vets have to deal with on a daily basis that maybe students wouldn't necessarily think about. One of those is that vets have to work with people as much as they have to work with animals, and therefore good people skills is as much necessary as good animal skills and animal handling skills. Vets deal with death on a daily basis, so it's not really cuddle cute animals kind of career, and students have to be realistic about that and have to deal with that. And vets are on call a lot. Therefore, students really need to think about whether they are flexible, adaptable, able to deal with stress, responsible, mature, and there is work indoors and outdoors in all seasons. So it is a really hard career and really difficult for anyone thinking about being a vet. That might be why they might not think about being a vet and why these other options might be more viable for them. We're talking about this in relation also to students that might not be meeting the entry requirements for vet schools, traditionally being lots of work experience, very high A-level qualifications. But there are new gateway programs that are opening up on most universities now for vet schools. They are highly competitive, but there's no reason why you can't advertise those to your students as well, as they're viable routes in.
Especially for learners who are coming through BTEC, City and Guilds routes, that there's some options going into Year Zeros and special entry initiatives that the vet schools offer. Equally, it's well worth giving your students the advice, if they are considering a career in veterinary medicine, that they spend some time in veterinary practice. That will help them with their application that's going forward, but it also gives them a more realistic appreciation of what life in a vet is actually like, which can perhaps change their mind about where they're actually going.
So hopefully that's a good introduction and we can start to think about some of the other alternative pathways. So I'll hand over to Kylie Thornton, who's going to talk to us about veterinary nursing. Okay, well, veterinary nursing is a very unique career choice, very different to being a vet, even though you obviously work alongside vets in practice. I would definitely second what my colleagues were just saying about doing some work experience. I think that's a really useful activity to undertake before you decide what sort of career path in a veterinary practice you might be interested in, just so that you can actually appreciate how different the roles are and exactly what roles a veterinary nurse would be involved with versus a veterinary surgeon. As I said, the roles are very different. So if you are interested, or you have students that are interested in pursuing a career in veterinary nursing, the best advice other than work experience would be for them to have a look at the different options out there at higher education level in terms of degrees. As Linda said about foundation degrees, we do actually offer foundation degrees and honours degrees in veterinary nursing. There are lots of different models out there. There is always an expectation for doing some work experience in a veterinary practice, but how that's actually embedded within the programme will vary from different institutions. So I think the best advice to give to potential students is to have a look what's out there. And see perhaps which model suits them best. The model that we offer would usually be students being here for 1 year of study at university before going out for a full year into practice, and then coming back to finish their degrees here afterwards. But there are other programmes as well. Another model that we also offer is actually a work-based option where students would be employed in a veterinary practice, but would come here 1 day a week, again at higher education levels. So there are different options out there, and it's about the students deciding what suits them best, really.
Carly, can I ask you a question? Can I be a veterinary nurse in small animal and equine and large animal, or is there specific routes?
You absolutely can be, but so there are specific routes. So ideally people need to be thinking about whether they ultimately want to work with small animals or equines or horses. There are mixed practices out there, so it is a possibility that you would be employed and work with a variety of species. But certainly in terms of training, we would be thinking about the two pathways. And certainly the practice that you would then end up on placement in would be specifically equine or small animals. So yeah, there is a requirement to decide which you prefer, really.
And this is quite a competitive market for places in higher education.
It is.
Is there any advice you could give me if I was a student writing a UCAS application?
Work experience. To sum it up, I think, yeah, we definitely look for evidence of lots of work experience in a variety of different practices, so that we can assess, you know, how, I suppose not how suitable you are, but as an applicant, whether somebody would have really sort of thought it through, and is it vet nursing that is really the career choice for them. So yeah, work experience, particularly in species-specific establishments as well. So if you want to do equine vet nursing, we would want to see evidence that you'd spent a significant amount of time. When I say significant, we're talking sort of up to 4 weeks, it really is a sort of minimum in a practice.
And in terms of, most places do interviews then, I guess.
Yeah, that would be normal to expect to be interviewed. So usually coming to the institution, and it will vary obviously between different institutions in terms of the sorts of activities that applicants might be involved in, but it would be the norm to expect to be interviewed.
And in those places you might expect to have to do group activities?
Potentially, yeah, maybe a presentation, individual presentation, group activities. As I said, it kind of varies between institutions. Certainly what we would expect people to be involved in kind of group activities, as well as it being an opportunity for you to find out a bit more about the institution as well, and actually whether this is the right place and the right veterinary nursing course for you as well as an applicant.
And like you say, the work experience really helps students to recognise whether they want to commit to this type of career, because they have to abide by a code of practice when they graduate. They have to talk about what it is to be a vet nursing and commit to that.
And what you said earlier, Linda, about vets needing to have people skills absolutely applies to vet nurses as well. So there is a code of conduct produced by the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, and it will cover all aspects of dealing with them, sort of what your responsibilities are to clients, to animals that you come into contact with as well. So yeah, absolutely. Training, so
Is it possible if I was to do this and I became on the degree that I could go to my local practice and train there?
Possibly. It depends whether your local practice is a training practice or not. So there is a list of training practices on the website for the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. You would have to go into a training practice to train to be a veterinary nurse. You can't just go to any practice. So it'd be really important to check that first, so what your options are.
So in terms of being a higher education student, it's quite different to what maybe a traditional degree student's lifestyle would be like. I would be expected at certain times to maybe not have as much flexibility.
Yeah, not as much holiday either. So you're going to be spending, again, it depends a little bit on the institution and what model they're using in terms of where this work-based element of your course is embedded, but it often would go over sort of holiday time that you would be working in practice. So it's a different experience. It's obviously very rewarding as a career choice, but it's tough, I think, in terms of you're doing that extra year. So a foundation degree would be 3 years, an honours degree would be 4 years. And the fact that you're obviously having less time, less free time, if you like, less holiday time, while you're gaining all of those skills that you need to be a competent veterinary nurse in practice.
I suppose that the positive side of that is you're actually working in practice alongside studying, so you're gaining
lots of hands-on skills. Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, you know, from an employability point of view, there is a national shortage of veterinary nurses. So as a career option, it's probably a good one to think about.
Good. Okay. So, unless anyone has any specific questions, we're going to ask Carly just to bring us into another area that's kind of linked to veterinary nursing, under the banner of veterinary practice management and thinking about pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, so a bit different to being a veterinary nurse, but certainly some of the activities may cross over in a practice. But practice management would obviously deal slightly more with the I suppose the sort of human resources side, the sort of paperwork, office based, and obviously management, as the name would suggest, sorts of activities. So not the nursing side of it, not any sort of hands-on contact with animals. Certainly under kind of current legislation, you wouldn't be allowed to be getting involved in any of those activities. So yeah, that's slightly different really to being a veterinary nurse. Anything else anyone would like to add to that?
I think it's one of these areas where you need probably a good foundation in terms of animal science or animal management and health, because that would help you to understand some of the practice responsibilities and what they're actually doing, but not to expect to be hands-on. And in a lot of the areas across animal generally and in equine, there's a number of related business degrees, which could potentially set you quite well to go into this career, because you have the things like marketing, you have human resource management, there'd be basic business knowledge, and it's about marketing them skills. So I mean, if you're thinking about doing some sort of practice management, it might be that you look at a course where you have some animal specific information and then you also have some business specific information, so you marry the best of both worlds together. And there's a number of programs which will do that. Equally, there is training afterwards, so some places will take you in and put you on professional CPD to upskill you to practice management. So don't think this is a career pathway that is closed off to you if you haven't done anything which has got business specifically within a degree program. In terms of pharmaceuticals and allied areas, this is an area which you can go again from quite broad animal degree program backgrounds. There's a key field of growth in careers looking at reps and sales representatives and opportunities, so particularly within nutrition, feedstuffs, and also selling the drugs. So that there's lots of allied areas which link through to veterinary practice, which involve going out predominantly sales and marketing skills, but again having that understanding of what the products do, how they contribute to health management and how they prevent disease. So having that broad science animal related degree base can put you on the road to a career within repping.
And I think it's important to point out, just because there's not a foundation degree veterinary practice management or a BSc pharmaceutical sales rep, that doesn't necessarily mean that the degrees won't build students' skills in relation to what they need to be successful in these careers. So it might be that during a degree they work in a group and recognise that actually they're a natural leader, and therefore they have kind of natural leadership skills in terms of management, and they build on that. Or they might find through presentations that they really like performing and they've got a bit of a gift of the gab, and they might be very good with sales, which through the different types of assessment and through the skills that are developed through any kind of allied degree, students would be able to recognise wider career opportunities, which is why some of the broader science degrees like the equine science, animal behaviour and welfare, animal health sciences, and those kinds of biosciences allow students to explore career options like this, which might seem quite abstract, but links in quite nicely once you start to recognise the skills you're developing during the degree. Okay. Okay. So the next area we're going to consider, and I think it is a very relevant area to consider, is the welfare and charity sector. There are probably kind of two tiers to look at when we think about welfare and charity. We can think about the animal technician, so the person who is hands-on with the animal in the charity sector, who might be a groom, it might be someone who is looking after and walking dogs, it might be someone who's actually going out to help and assist with rescues. Might be someone who is an education officer and so takes information out to schools and other areas to make sure that people are aware of what's happening in that particular charity sector. Might be involved in policy, might be involved in lobbying, might be involved in the admin that goes on behind all kinds of charity or organisations. So there are many different tiers to think about in relation to welfare and charity sector. And obviously in relation to animals, there's lots of different animals and there's lots of different types of charities linked to animals. And so really the world is your oyster. We've got a specific example here of one of our graduates from the equine science honours degree who went off to work for the Horse Trust, and she came back and did an honours postgraduate degree with us also. And she's done research in the field, which has really helped her with her career progression. So while she was studying, she was able to study something which was very relevant to her particular career, and her employer supported her to do the postgraduate qualification, which furthered, as we say, her career opportunities there. So when we're thinking about students, maybe with a foundation degree, we're thinking about students that want to work practically with animals, would set them up very well for animal technician positions. For the honours degree, what we're thinking about is pushing students into graduate level careers. So we're thinking about management, supervision, leadership, innovative thinking type positions.
I think it's also important to recognise within that within a lot of these organisations there are layers. So like Linda's alluded to, you do have the technician role and potentially there's progression within an organisation. For the BSc honours graduates, they have the skill set, if you like, which will facilitate them moving forward to become a leader and to go into that true graduate level job. But we quite often see that there's a time lag before that occurs. So if we look at our employability data, there is almost a hands-on element which people do, and a lot of the time that is through choice and not necessarily because they're not entering into them jobs, but they want to spend some time on the ground doing that foundation level, if you like, where you would go through, learn the roles, understand what is actually happening, and then progress forward into leadership and management. So I don't think that's something that you should discount and think that, oh, if I do a degree, I can't go in and do that hands-on aspect. What it does is it gives you additional skills, and when you get to the point perhaps where you're thinking for a little bit more or you want to take your career in a slightly different direction, you've also got the skill set to be able to do that. Within general animal degree programmes, there's a number of areas, I suppose, which link nicely to welfare and charity. There's a series of degrees which are linked to animal behaviour and welfare or equine behaviour and welfare. And there's obvious connotations there that they can link through. So we see a lot of charities which are involved with rehoming animals and with managing animals on a daily basis. Behaviour plays a huge part within that as well. So them forms of degrees can be really useful to get you the foot in the door. You can engage in research within them areas with these organisations as well, which again gives you something which you can sell and take you forward into a career in that area. The other broad spectrum, I suppose, is anything which is linked to science and management, because you're talking about health and disease, breeding, and how animals operate and how best to optimise their health and performance, and that underpins a lot of the strategic objectives within this area too.
And also probably veterinary nursing,
yes.
I'd like to add as well. So lots of charities would employ vet nurses as well. So they would appear.
Yeah, if you look at a lot of the large animal charities, they would have veterinary nursing and, to be fair, veterinary medicine departments where they would be looking at managing the health of animals within the veterinary context in-house at the same time too.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of opportunities within the welfare and charity sector for students that are thinking about alternative veterinary careers.
Another potential area where students can look to go into, which is quite nicely allied to veterinary medicine, is animal therapy and the multiple subject areas that fall within this. So we have some very distinct careers that sit under this heading. So you would have titles of animal physiotherapist, animal osteopath, McTimoney chiropractic practitioner. Now, I think we need to be really clear to start off with a lot of these areas have developed, and there's lots of degrees out there which will do veterinary physiotherapy. In terms of students looking to go into this area, a lot of the people who vets will work with have chartered and professional status. Now, what that means is the degrees that the students have chosen to go on have had some professional body recognition, so for example by the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists. So it's important when you're looking at going into this and potentially thinking of setting yourself up as a practitioner at some point in time that you can get insurance, that market for you is always going to be there. And I think from my point of view, engaging with a programme which has an affiliation to the professional body and has chartered status helps you to achieve that. Now, in a lot of terms, some of these programmes therefore are not necessarily at undergraduate, but almost need you to take a step to the side and then go forward into animals. So if you were looking at degrees which enabled you to qualify as a chartered animal physiotherapist or osteopath, then to get chartered status, currently you would need to do a human undergraduate degree first, qualify as a human physio, and then you would go on to do a master's, so a postgraduate course, which would give you the specific skills to be an animal physiotherapist. There are alternatives out there. As I say, there are degrees in veterinary physiotherapy and different titles of that name. There are potential for them to set you up helping and supporting the qualified physiotherapists in practice or working in allied areas such as hydrotherapy, which you can see on the images there. So there is a qualification that can make you a chartered hydrotherapist, and that's embedded in some programs or can be done as a qualification alongside that. But I do think it's worth spending a bit of time to explore the human options first before going into animal. There's also programs which will have therapy as an adjunct, and I think this is one of the strengths of doing an animal degree or an equine degree. When you come in to do these degrees, quite often you're not 100% sure about where you actually do want to go. And one of the benefits that are embedded within the structure of degree programs are often a lot of choice. So the first year of most animal courses would give you a fundamental understanding of how an animal works, its anatomy, its physiology, health, genetics, breeding, that sort of stuff. So you can actually function competently around an animal and you understand how it is actually functioning. The second and third years then quite often embed pathways which allow you to specialise in certain areas and to tailor the degree more to your own personal interest. Now, animal therapy can be one of these areas which is embedded in. So, for example, here we have two courses, one in equine and one in animal, where the students can do that, and they'll be exposed to hydrotherapy, to the different therapeutic modalities which therapists use, and we would see that setting them up to be able to work within these type of therapy centres where they're managing and working with physiotherapists and vets to be able to facilitate the rehabilitation of animals. And I think that's something which is important to think about when you're looking at animal and equine degrees, is there is that flexibility to get quite a broad base of knowledge, but also to tailor it specifically to areas which you become more interested in over the course of a programme.
There are normally the option modules that you can choose, so there might be streams through a programme where you can focus specifically on genetics, or you can focus specifically on behaviour, or specifically on therapy, and there are some programmes that are devoted to specific pathways with therapy in, such as the ones that we run at Hartbury. It's worth thinking about how maybe some of these broader equine and animal science-based degrees can act as springboards into allied and maybe veterinary careers in the future, potentially also. With the biological science at degree level and a knowledge of how an animal operates, you give yourself a springboard into those kinds of areas. And we know that students have gone off on to become body workers and horse massage and those types of things due to having the degree. We also know that students have converted from our animal and equine science degrees into veterinary degrees, which reduces the amount of time that they've had to study for, but actually is longer overall. Might be worth ever so quickly mentioning in relation to therapy and any working with animal, but specifically therapy, if you want to set yourself up as a therapist, so you go the full human and then animal route and become a chartered physio or osteopath, it is physically demanding. Students need to recognise that they have to be physically fit to be working animals on a daily basis, and it's probably
poignant to recognise that if they're going to do it, they're probably going to be self-employed. So they have to have some probably business background or support to be able to support them to be successful in that particular career path.
And again, there's a common theme that comes through, but you will be dealing a lot with people. And particularly in a self-employed basis, you need to be able to sell yourself and your profession and your skills. So you do need to be able to still have them good communication skills, interpersonal skills and personality to be able to do that.
There is a clear theme, isn't there? Wherever there's animals, there's people.
Oops, apologies, wrong way. So if we're then looking at some of the other approaches, so if we think about general academic research and lab-based careers, this probably encapsulates the remaining types of degrees which are left. So we've already touched on the fact there's general animal science degrees out there and equine science degrees and different variations of so animal science and management, etc. The other area which you might come across if you're looking across the sector is bioveterinary science and biomedical science and other bits and pieces that come through that way. Now, these degrees generally, as we've said, give you a broad base within different sciences relating to how an animal functions. And certain ones will have different specialisms which will link to the institution, so it's worth spending a bit of time looking at the institution and looking at some of the module structure and the program structure to see what streams, if you like, are embedded within there. But generally for me, if you're looking at animal science or equine science, then you would be quite interested in the animal and the science that is underpinning that animal. So you would be thinking about maybe going forward into careers where you'd be working with animals, but maybe the management and linking through to nutrition and sales like we talked about, or going into the labs and actually working on research-based project or working in labs which are dealing with doing blood tests or dealing with doing sample analysis on a daily basis. The bioveterinary science route can be quite good if you're looking at that sort of lab, more specific science aspect to go through. So bioveterinary science is slightly different to animal science and equine science in that these type of degrees came about almost as an alternative to veterinary medicine to open up the sector, I suppose, to careers which are aligned to veterinary medicine and potentially give a route into veterinary medicine as a second degree. Having said that, in the recent years, they've evolved in their own right, and they're now a really excellent course because what they do is give you a real strong foundation in general science as well as the animal context, which is alongside that. So the main difference between an animal science degree and the bioveterinary science degree would be the content of science which is in there. And that would be very much contextualised to veterinary. So you'll be doing a lot more health assessments, a lot more working in the labs doing diagnostic tests, things like worm counts, doing staining, more microbiology, more biochemistry. And we'd see that there may be a stronger laboratory-based research aspect that would come through at the same time with bioveterinary science. Having said that, I mean, even though it might naturally set itself towards a more lab-based career, you can go into laboratory work from animal or from equine science as much as from bioveterinary science. One of the benefits of doing bioveterinary science, if you wanted to come in and do one of these as a forerunner, if you like to go and do veterinary medicine because maybe that hasn't quite worked out on the initial attempt, is a lot of bioveterinary science degrees are mapped through to the first year of veterinary medicine degrees. So they have the content and they will be seen as a clear progression pathway, and potentially if you went on to do veterinary medicine, you may not have to do as many modules in the first year because you've covered some of that there. So because of that, it's similar to veterinary medicine in that it has an element of chemistry, as I say, the biochemistry, the microbiology, and that real veterinary exploration of animal health and disease comes through quite strongly on these programs.
Absolutely. I guess what we find is that students join us who maybe came in from what we would consider a non-traditional background, thinking that they want to engage with higher education and get the degree. And they might start off on a foundation degree because they feel that they are vocational or practical learners, and then they get bitten by the bug of academia and they want to stay on and progress through to an honours degree and then top up onto the masters. A master's can also act as a springboard into research degrees, which takes you into the world of lecturing and professorship and the joys of being in that career, which is hard work.
I think if we look at the animal sector generally, I mean, we've talked about very specific degrees, and within them there's subject streams, as we've touched on. So therapy is one of them, lab is one of them, and research careers are one of them. One of the other emerging areas is looking at performance. So both within equine and particularly in canine coming through, you see a lot of kinematic analysis, gait analysis, biomechanics. So this is about taking animals and how they move and exploring how they move, and there are careers which are starting to arise around that. So it can be linked in as an allied professional to veterinary medicine because you're working with the vets in terms of the gait analysis and part of the rehabilitation team, potentially with therapists. But also within our performance animals, so if you think about horses which are operating both for leisure or in competition, and within dogs more and more, lameness evaluation and also assessment of gait for performance is one of the key areas where somebody can come in and be exposed to technology. We can teach them the skeleton, the muscles, they can understand the gait, how it actually is put together in terms of phasing. We can then use kit, and one of the benefits of being a HE student is you'll get access to these type of facilities and the types of technologies which are being used at cutting edge research and also by sort of elite level performers and elite level vets. And you get to see how they work, you get to understand how they operate, and then you get some skills so you can start to apply that through. I think we have nutrition, which is another stream which comes through in terms of animals generally. And as we've said, there's lots of careers in nutrition in terms of sales, but also within laboratory-based nutrition, lots of research posts which are available within nutrition at the same time. And it's something that even if you wanted to go into a charity sector, there's always going to be people who are looking at giving nutritional advice to animals. So it covers a wide range of areas.
I think, yeah, it's worth pointing out that maybe a lot of people finish their degree or finish a master's and then head off out into industry to get a job. And then with the master's qualification specifically, they feel as though they want to re-engage with research and they want to come back into academia. So it can take some time out and then come back into lecturing, which I think we do with veterinary nursing quite well. And in a variety of other ways.
We do see a lot of people will come into lecturing from these areas. I mean, there is other allied fields as well which link into veterinary careers. So you have the zoo and the wildlife sector. We have a lot of people who will come in thinking maybe they want to be a vet and then end up working alongside vets within the zoo areas. So being a zookeeper, going into wildlife conservation, looking at doing research in these areas also gives you the opportunity to work within the veterinary team and to be allied to them, but have a slightly different approach and a slightly different specialism. I think it's important to recognise that veterinary medicine is quite specific, but as veterinary medicine is developing, there's more and more opportunities for people to work with vets in a whole variety of different contexts. And this is where these degrees can be excellent because they can give you the skill set to be able to problem solve, and they're very much about application of the science to practical contexts. And I think that's quite nice. If you thought that initially you maybe wanted to be a vet, I know that would be the type of thing which would attract me towards veterinary medicine, and you can still get that interaction with the animals. Yes, people are a big part of it as well, and we can't discount that, but you do get the hands-on, the application, and you get to problem solve something and to feel like you're making a difference, which I think is one of the key drivers which makes people go into veterinary medicine in the first instance.
I think that's where, excuse me, work experience comes back, doesn't it? Trying out these different routes and finding out a little bit more about them, speaking to people that do these different careers as well, finding out how they got into it, you know, what courses they did as well. It's just exploring, really.
Yeah. And I think the joys of degrees are in terms of the research that all students are required to do as part of it. So at the end of the day, the students can go off and investigate any particular area that they've got an interest in, using any equipment that's available at any institution and the expertise that is there as well. And that can often springboard students on into academia or further research degrees, which are very viable career paths to continue on into. Being a student forever is fun. We probably haven't touched so much upon the sandwich year opportunity that exists with some of the higher education provision, specifically foundation degrees because of the vocational nature and the requirement for work-based learning from these particular programs of study, but you also find them on honours degree programs as well. I don't know if you want to talk any more about
They're quite common within this sector because, again, we are talking a lot of the time about areas where there is that applied practical context. So we see a lot of students will elect to take a sandwich year, and also within animal and equine degrees generally you'll see modules which might integrate a study trip or a field course or some element of practical learning and period away where you actually immerse yourself in something. And I think that's important because it is helping to build up the employability skills which the sector are looking for. So it's something which you can utilise, particularly in terms of a sandwich degree. If you have an aspiration towards a certain career, you can go and take a year out either within the UK or you can go abroad. You can work with a specific place and you can utilise that experience to build up your CV and to make you stand out as a candidate. You can also link that through to any research that you're going to do. So the majority of honours-based undergraduate degrees will have a dissertation, and a sandwich year can be an excellent opportunity to combine both the employability characteristics that you're going to grow and learn alongside data collection to make your dissertation another tool to really sell you and say, look, this is what I can do, this is what I'm really interested in, and this is why you should employ me.
Yeah. Do you think maybe we need to give some examples of placements that students go on? Sorts of places they go, roughly?
Well, I mean, the first thing that springs to mind is Kentucky. We have a good link with Kentucky and the food company or feed supplier and research laboratory out in Kentucky. So we have students going off to do some placement sandwich years with them and can do some data collection or bits and pieces linked to their dissertation whilst they're on that sandwich year as well.
Laboratories, places like that?
So again, we have lots of links with local laboratories across the veterinary sector and animal management sector, and we have students working with them. We do a field trip, and I know a lot of courses which will do a field trip which will integrate a period of time in South Africa, so you get exposed to different wildlife and build up different skills as tracking and understanding conservation and going through that way as well.
And most providers with sandwich year programs will have contacts for students to be able to apply, but there's no reason why students can't have their own ideas at the back of their mind where they might want to go and spend a year studying and working at the same time as part of their degree.
I think another area which maybe I slightly rushed over, apologies, a bit earlier on, was when we looked at animal behaviour and welfare, and one of the other allied areas in terms of a veterinary career and working with vets is to be within animal behaviour counselling or pet behaviour counselling, and undertaking an animal behaviour and welfare degree can lead you into that. Again, there are some professional bodies which you might want to affiliate to.
Yeah, like the Association of Pet Behaviour Counsellors, for example. You can find more information on their website. Yeah, I think, as Jane was saying, to do with physio, it is important that you actually look at ultimately what you're going to be able to do at the end of any degree programme that you're exploring, excuse me, to make sure that you're actually going to be accredited and you're going to be able to actually practice in the UK, rather than just gaining skills, which might be what a student is after. They want to sort of gain some skills and work alongside other veterinary professionals. But if your ultimate plan is to be a pet behaviour counsellor, you really do need to be appropriately qualified.
But this degree would help you on that path.
It absolutely would, yeah.
And you'll find more and more that degree programs are trying to embed some of these vocational qualifications so that during the course of study for a degree program you would come out with a vocational qualification that would enable you to practice as soon as you graduated.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What we're going to do is summarise and start to think about some of the things that we've talked about. Hopefully the streams or the options that we've provided give you something to talk to students about other than veterinarian. It is just one career option. I can talk from experience in that particular area, as when I was very young I wanted to be a vet, and I did my A-levels and didn't do so well, or any work experience, and came in to do an equine science degree and have stayed in academia ever since. I was first from family, low socioeconomic background, single parent, low income household, so relating to hopefully a wide variety of students now thinking about higher education. But the idea is that if you've got your sights set on something, it means that you've got aspirations and goals, and you just need to do something different to see what other options are out there. So if students want to work with animals more than people, they might intrinsically prefer some of the other options that we've provided, but they might also do in a broader degree program find something that they are more suited to, or they might discover a new skill that might not have been apparent if they'd have just stuck thinking that they wanted to be a vet. So some of the broader programs are designed to enable students with interest in the topic area to develop graduate level skills, and this supports progression into a range of careers. So just because you do an equine program or you study animal behaviour and welfare, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do a career linked to horses and animals. I would say that 50% of our equine students go off and use their graduate level skills for graduate level jobs outside of the world of horses, knowing that you get paid more and you can still have horses as a hobby because you can afford to. So it doesn't necessarily, if you do a subject-specific degree, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do a career linked to it. You can sell yourself in a variety of different ways. A, I have a degree. B, it's a biological degree. C, it's an applied degree. I've done this work experience. D, I've done this piece of research which makes me a subject specialist in this particular area. Some of our students have started to research into education now, which makes them broader into educational policy, potentially, and education research. So there's all kinds of flexibility linked in with the degree pathway these days. It's not rigidly set in stone. The entry requirements for each of the programs or the subject areas and the programs linked to those that we've talked about today, they do vary quite substantially. So your foundation degree, you might be looking at probably 60 tariff points upwards, maybe, for some. Yep. And for some of your honours degree programs, you're probably looking at the realms of 80 to 90 up. So you do have to kind of look around for the different institutions, thinking about what you might be achieving. Open days are the best way to go and find out about institutions, what type of support is available, what types of facilities, what types of expertise, what types of nightlife, all that kind of thing that you need to think about as a student potentially. You do probably need to have some specific work experience going forwards. It's a good idea to think about doing it before you do your degree, so that you can start to think about which degree is going to suit your career at the end. So you might do a piece of work experience that you decide you never want to do that work ever again. It might change your whole degree outlook. Similarly, it might be something that you fall in love with, and your degree would help you with that, and the work experience would help you on the degree, and vice versa. So work experience is a good thing. And students should be thinking about graduate level jobs off the back of a degree. It's a highly competitive market at the moment, and so all kinds of vocational qualifications and additional student experiences will help students in that jobs market currently. So student ambassador positions are a good thing, student representative positions are a good thing. Anything that you can do to boost your CV and show that you are not just an equine science graduate or an animal behaviour and welfare science graduate.
I think I would follow on from that, particularly what Linda said in terms of looking at the right place for where you're going to study. You're making a big commitment when you go on a degree. You're going to do something for 2, 3 or 4 years, depending on the route that you're taking. Take the time to go and visit the institution, to have a look in to see what resources they've got, what research they're engaged with, what kit maybe they have available for that type of thing as well. There's quite a wide variety within the animal sector of institutions that offer degree programs, and some are very heavily science focused and will be very classroom based and potentially sometime in a science lab, but with very little hands-on animal contact or any practical element to that, whereas you have the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which have a lot of animal contact and less time in a more traditional lecture theatre type environment. And I think you have to recognise where you are as a student and which one maybe is the best option for you, and also which is the one which is going to support you the best for where your longer term career aspirations are at the same time. And not to forget that this is a degree, and the degree offers you a much wider set of skills than just the subject knowledge. When we speak to employers, they very much feedback to us that they're confident about the subject detail that the degrees offer. So for example, if you did equine science, they pretty much know, you know, what a horse is and how it works. What they're never quite as confident about, and which they always feedback that we could do more of, is the interpersonal skills and the customer service, and it goes back to the people and that client support. So here at Hartbury, we work very hard to embed that throughout, and it's something which is becoming more common across the sector. It's very much about the wider skills that you gain as a graduate, and that graduate employability is equally as important to employers as the subject knowledge that you come away with.
Okay, I think for teachers and careers advice guidance people, in relation to the programmes or the subject areas we've been talking about today, a quick search through UCAS suggested that there's about 20 providers for vet nursing degrees currently in England. And if you search equine, there's plenty more, and the animal is plenty more as well. So there are lots and lots of different institutions to try and whittle your decision down about where to study. And all of the factors that we've talked about today, I think, will help you make some criteria around your decisions. What we might do now is start to wrap it up a little bit more. And we'll start to answer some of the questions that have been coming through. Thank you very much for those. So if you have any more questions, now's the time to start typing, and we'll do our best to answer as much as possible. I'm going to leave the contact details up on this page now so that you have my email address if by 5:15 we haven't been able to answer your question, or there is something that you would like to ask outside of this particular sphere. So thank you very much.
Okay, so we've had a question which is asking whether you can be a vet nurse for farm animals. Now, the reality is that some vet nurses will work with farm animals, but certainly in terms of training, you would normally train to be either a small animal or an equine veterinary nurse. If you worked in a mixed practice, you may encounter farm animals, but I would say the opportunities would be limited to those kind of more rural mixed practices. So you can't sort of train to specifically be a vet nurse for farm animals, but you may well encounter a variety of different species throughout your career, including farm animals, exotic species, and obviously cats and dogs and horses.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I never thought about as a vet nurse is that you have to deal with spiders.
Not very often.
Thankfully.
Yes. But potentially, yeah, snakes and all sorts. Yeah, wildlife.
Okay. There was a question around veterinary nurse apprenticeships.
Oh yeah, degree or apprenticeships. Okay, so the advantage of doing a vet nursing degree versus the more, I suppose, traditional work-based learning sort of level 3 type qualification, so sort of below the level of first year degree, is really, I suppose, about the experience that you get. So as a HE student or as a potential HE student, you would obviously study in a very different way, and you would get that kind of degree student lifestyle type experience, which a lot of young people, I imagine, probably would quite like. But there's also the extra skills, like all these sort of additional skills that you would gain as well. So particularly if you did an honours degree in veterinary nursing, those kind of research type skills, management, some business potentially, depending on the some of the optional modules you might select in your honours degree. So the sort of extra skills, and I suppose it's the depth as well. So the honest answer is you will be eligible to register with the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons as a veterinary nurse and work in the UK, or potentially abroad if you wanted to, whether you did a degree or an apprenticeship. But it's about looking at the sort of added value, I suppose, of doing an honours degree versus an apprenticeship.
I think it's also fair to say that veterinary nursing is following the model of human nursing, and it's becoming very much more a degree level profession. And veterinary nurses are being encouraged to reflect and engage with the patient and with their clients a lot more. And if you want to have a sort of vibrant career structure which is going to progress within veterinary nursing, having that degree gives you that.
So an alternative option that sort of bridges the two is actually a course that we've designed here at Hartpury, which is a diploma in professional studies veterinary nursing. So it's actually a higher education level. I mentioned it very briefly earlier. But students are actually employed in a practice, so they're still kind of getting that higher education skill set, I suppose, and that sort of experience, but they are also employed in practice and earning money throughout the rest of the week. So that's kind of a first of its kind, really, a new style of course as well to train to be a veterinary nurse.
Okay. I think it's interesting to think that the government is making a push for higher or degree level apprenticeships now. So the sector is going to change again as we start to see that type of thing coming through from employment and industry, potentially. The question around the best level 3 qualification for post-16 with students whose GCSE results don't allow progression to A-level biology and chemistry is a good question.
Yes. I think if we sort of take a step back and we're looking at students who are coming in to honours degree level across animal, equine and bioveterinary science, we quite often would be requesting students to have a biological A-level. And we also would tend to look at GCSEs. Now that does vary to some extent across institutions. First initial aspect is you might put a student on a foundation degree if maybe they haven't got the strongest GCSEs or A-level, so they get their foundation in science and then look at progressing onwards, and you can do top-ups onto full honours degrees. In terms of the best sort of non-traditional or non-A-level route to come through, I think you can look at both BTEC and City and Guilds programmes and the diploma programmes. These are designed specifically to feed into some of these courses. For me personally, and it is a personal opinion, I like to see that students have had a taste of exams, and therefore that might be something. I know it's now integrated in BTEC and City and Guilds, but it's that recognition of studying maybe in a similar way to what they would do at higher education. So across HE there's lots of varied forms of assessment, but they will come across a traditional exam at probably some point during that programme. So having some experience earlier on which has set them up for that is useful. I'd also look for them having science-based modules within that diploma that they were undertaking. So I'd want to see that they had done something which is going to allow them to progress and to move forward. But if you look at general BTEC City and Guild courses in animal management, equine management, they will set a student up to come through. In terms of veterinary nursing, is it the same?
It is the same, yeah. We do specifically ask for a biology A-level or an equivalent. So that's, I suppose, the only way that we'd be slightly different to some of the other programmes that we offer. And we're quite strict on it being a biology A-level or a sort of definite equivalent rather than like a kind of applied science type qualification. So it does need to be the equivalent of a full biology A-level.
I think it's interesting to think that GCSEs do set the children up now for so much in relation to further education. If you're not successful with GCSEs and you choose to do BTEC, then the BTEC is a very viable route into higher education, and higher education is responding to the changing student profile coming through with a variety of different assessments and support mechanisms for the different or non-traditional student coming in to study a degree. That withstanding, I think if students are coming through into BTECs without the GCSE requirements, then they really do push them to do Key Stage 3. Thank you. Yes, whilst they're doing their BTEC. So it's not that they just forget about the GCSEs. If they want to do higher education, then they really do need to think about GCSEs whilst they're doing the BTEC.
I think it's quite easy to forget about the GCSE level, if you like, when you go on to your BTEC and you're thinking more about the A-level equivalent, but a lot of universities will go back to that and make sure that you've actually got it in place as part of their criteria. One of the, following on from that question, we've just been asked whether medical science diploma would be okay. Now for me personally, I think that yes, I'd definitely consider that as an entry route in. If you think of the A-level that students can come through, they can be quite wide and varied. What I would be looking for within a UCAS statement alongside that would be some animal experience, because I'd want to see that you understood the sector you were going to go into, whether that's you've had your own animals, whether you've done some work experience somewhere. I mean, that would strengthen your application for me, and to try and put that into context in your statements as well. So not just I love animals and I've had lots of them, but give some examples of what you've learned from having the animals, or maybe a particular situation with them which has inspired you to want to go on and to do something in this career. And if you can marry that together and also pull out the experience that you've got from medical science, which will support you within it. So within medical sciences, I'm assuming you're doing some biology, I'm assuming there'll be a bit of chemistry in there as well. So you can give some of that detail coming through at the same time to really sell yourself.
Is it worth us briefly mentioning an access course as an option?
Oh, absolutely. The access courses are kind of set up for more mature students who are returning from a period where they haven't studied for a while to study back into higher education and might not have the relevant qualifications that are required for higher education study. So it's like a foundation year, if you like, to enable them to get back into the swing of studying, to get back into academic writing. It's a year study. programme. It's normally on site at the institution, and different institutions will run different subject-specific ones. So because we are animal, land, equine and sport, then we have access courses aligning with those particular subject areas.
What we're also seeing a lot more within the sector generally is year zeros within degree programmes as well. So you may come across some degrees which traditionally the honours degree would be 3 years plus the optional sandwich year, but there's an embedded year zero, so a pre-year almost. So where a student doesn't quite meet the tariff or doesn't quite get the entry, they're allowed to come in and to study something which is quite often linked to subject-specific skills, but also study skills, and they're enrolled on the programme they wanted to come on, but they're effectively doing a year to progress them up to the first year intake. And that's proving quite popular in a number of places.
Most of the BTEC level 3 diplomas and extended diplomas, animal, equine, medical science, all of those, the higher education sector is changing in response to the growing number of non-traditional, i.e. but BTEC or City and Guild students progressing into higher education. And so they are very viable entry qualifications, and the majority of universities now will state A-levels and equivalent, which is BTEC or City and Guild qualifications as entry requirements. So I think that's a really positive move.
I think the areas where maybe you would struggle is, let's say you did a BTEC in hairdressing or something which was completely unrelated and there wasn't an element of science or an element of the animal in there. I think they're the areas where we would maybe question and go, actually, how is this fitting with where you are? Because what we don't want to do is to accept students onto the degree courses who haven't got a realistic expectation of maybe what they're about, but also don't have that fundamental knowledge and understanding, so that we're almost bringing you in and then having to upskill you so much that we're putting you at a disadvantage when you go forward.
Yeah. I'm not sure that we've got any more questions that are outstanding at the moment, and I don't think that we've necessarily, I think we've covered everything that we wanted to cover. I really hope that that's been useful for you guys in relation to providing students with additional options in terms of careers and how to achieve those with higher education programs of study. If you do have any further questions, or if you want to ask anything after, because you can't think of any questions now, my email address is incorrectly on the screen. So please note that Hartpury has a Y in it, an R in it. See, I can't even spell now. So it's hartpury.ac.uk. I do apologise. I'll update the slide before it gets put onto the website for general access. But if you have any feedback or if you have any other questions, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. We've really enjoyed talking to you this evening. It's been really refreshing being able to think about this, and we hope that it's been useful to you guys as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.